When we think about tragic characters in Assassin's Creed, we often jump straight to the big names: Altair, Bayek, Maybiano, characters whose pain is front and center in the games. But there is one character whose entire life is basically suffering from beginning to end, and most people barely even know his story. Not because it isn't important, but because it's buried in Assassin's Creed transmedia. That character's name is Daniel Cross. You might recognize him from Assassin's Creed 3, the guy in the leather jacket hunting down Desmond throughout his search for power sources. The game frames him as just another Templar antagonist, but that barely scratches the surface. What the games don't really tell you is that Daniel's life was never his to begin with. Before he was a Templar, before he ever met the Assassins, before he even knew who he was already being used. Most of Daniel Cross's story comes from the comics named Assassin's Creed The Fall and Assassin's Creed The Chain, which highlights the downfall of the modern day assassins. And to be honest, it might be one of the darkest stories this franchise has ever told. I went back and reread it recently to prepare for this video, and if you've never checked these comics out, I highly recommend them because Daniel Cross's life is a story that's far from just falling from grace. It's about a life that was broken so early and pointed in a direction by other people, to the point where he was never really given a chance to be anything else. Now, disclaimer. This video will contain a lot, and I mean a lot of content from the comics, so hopefully you like this style of video. It's a bit different. Before Daniel Cross ever chose a side, before the Assassins, before Abstergo, his life was already being decided for him. The first pages of the Fall comics don't even ease you into it. You're immediately looking at this scene from the perspective of a child strapped to a table with doctors looking over him. Nobody is asking if he's scared. Nobody's asking if he understands what's happening. Because, to these doctors, he's not a child. He's a test subject. Abstergo literally labels him Subject 4. We can also understand the context of Subject 4 based on the Abstergo research log that we can see in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. This here on screen is an email from 1985. Now remember that year, 1985. Daniel Cross was born in 1974, so this all happened to a young Daniel who would be 11 years old. And this is a letter that's sent by a familiar face who we know as Warren Vidic, with the initials WV. And he sends this letter to an individual named S. Now S is a woman named Sung. Remember Sung, she's an important character for later on. Now Sung is a doctor that's working at Abstergo. In this letter, Warren Vidic refers to him as Subject 4 while discussing testing a prototype piece of Eden on him between Animus sessions. That email is quite interesting when you think about it because they're casually talking about mind control technology, about eventually deploying it worldwide. And the very first person that they test this on is a kidnapped child. Back in the early 80s, Abstergo plugs Daniel into the Animus long before anybody really understands what prolonged Animus exposure does to an adult, let alone a child. They're pulling genetic memories out of him, forcing his brain to relive lives it has no framework to process. So what's being extracted from him would be languages that he's never learned before, places that he's never been before. I mean, entire identities bleeding into his own. There's a moment in the comic that says everything about how Abstergo operates. The doctor on the left, named Dr. Clark, suggests increasing the anesthetic to reduce the trauma of the procedure. This sounds reasonable, right? You want to keep your test subject safe. And the response from the other doctor on the right, who by the way is Warren Vidic, is basically no. You see, trauma is important, and trauma will allow them to not miss out on any quote-unquote juicy bits that they want to extract. And then there's the worst part of all of this. Using a replicated piece of Eden, Abstergo implants a hidden impulse, or rather an urge, in his mind. This impulse would be a trigger designed to stay dormant for years, and this impulse will only activate under one very specific condition. You see, if Daniel Cross at any point in his entire life is face to face with the assassin mentor, his own body will take over and literally force him to kill the assassin mentor, no hesitation. That choice is taken away from him before he even knows what the assassin order is. In fact, he knows nothing at this age. So right here, before Daniel can even understand what memories are, his brain is being flooded with memories that are not his. This is the bleeding effect. And I think a misconception that I've been seeing a lot is that Daniel Cross only suffered from it later in life. No, he suffered from the bleeding effect as a young child, which explains so much about how his life turns out. And once Abstergo gets what he wants, they're done. That's the part that really toys with you, because you would think after making this innocent child your test subject and drugging him with all sorts of needles, they'd maybe look after him, but nope. They don't even try to help him function in the real world. What Abstergo does is give him the name Daniel Cross and just dump him back into society. Now, this next part of the comic is quite dark because it's not explained much. But you just have to read between the lines, and you will see how truly evil and inhumane Abstergo are. You see this small child wandering alone down a road, right? He's barefoot and wearing no clothing. But what you can also notice is bruises. Now, the question that immediately gets presented is, why on earth does he have bruises on his face and body? It's not explained to us or shown to us. But I think we can make an educated assumption and say Abstergo were physically abusing an 11-year-old child, on top of them using him as a test subject. Or perhaps let's give Abstergo the benefit of the doubt, which is not likely, but maybe he just got bullied during his long walk on the road. But one thing is for sure, Daniel Cross is clearly not okay. A couple stops their truck and they ask him what he's doing out here, where his parents are, what his name is. And Daniel doesn't answer in English, he just says one thing and it's in Russian. Now, thanks to the beauty of Google Translate, we can translate it. And when translated, a young Daniel says, and I quote, "I want to go home." Now think about that for a second. He doesn't even know where home is. He doesn't know who he is. But his brain is already defaulting to somebody else's language. That right there is a bleeding effect baked directly into his childhood. Nobody ever explains this to him. Nobody sits him down at one point in life and says, "Hey Daniel, you were experimented on as a child. That's why your head feels wrong." So Daniel grows up thinking that this is just how life is supposed to feel. A life full of random voices, random flashes, random, emotions tied to things he never lived through. And this part of the video where we're explaining his tragic childhood is quite important. So at this point, we can evidently gather that Daniel Cross's entire childhood was a tragic one. And he grows up having this absolutely terrible upbringing. Now in this part of the video, we'll talk about Daniel Cross growing up. And when I say growing up, I don't mean he figures his life out. I mean the damage from his early childhood finally starts showing itself in ways nobody around him understands. By the time we meet him as an adult, Daniel Cross is already living in survival mode. Things like petty crime. He has no real job or income stability. And most importantly, his mind is still doing the same thing it's been doing since he was a child. The bleeding effect never stopped. If anything, it got worse. Now this entire video is all about Daniel Cross, so I'm not going to dive into the story of Nikolai Orlov because if you aren't aware, the Fall comics tells the story of both Daniel Cross in the modern times and also Nikolai Orlov for the historical story. Those are the memories he's bleeding into. But Nikolai Orlov's story is its own beast, and to be honest deserves a full video on its own. Maybe I'll get to that one day, because there's a lot of depth there. But bringing it back to Daniel Cross, he starts seeing visions of this Russian man. And when we say visions, we don't mean quick flashes or vague dreams. We're talking about him completely losing himself in them. There are moments where Daniel Cross genuinely thinks he's Nikolai Orlov, reliving memories like they're happening right now. He hears voices he cannot understand, Randy Orton style. He sees signs he cannot read. That's where the drugs and alcohol come in. He resorts to that not because he's reckless, but because it's the only thing that quiets his brain. And that spiral costs him everything. You see, Daniel Cross at one point in his adult life managed to get himself a girlfriend named Kelly, but that bit of normalcy does not last long at all. Everything falls apart when Daniel kills her accidentally during a psychotic episode. He doesn't even realize what's happening to him, but that episode is a direct result of the bleeding effect. After that, he's convicted and sent to prison. Eventually though, he's released on probation and required to see a psychiatrist. And yes, it's the same psychiatrist we end up seeing in the comics right here on screen. The solutions given to him are simply medication, stuff that will suppress these visions and keep him functional enough to not cause any problems. But yeah, that doesn't work whatsoever. You see, him taking medication just makes him feel empty. So eventually Daniel stops taking them altogether. So Daniel storms out in a fit of rage, throwing away the prescription and going straight to a bar. And this next sequence shows us why that medication was so important. You see, Daniel drinks too much. And doing so, he embarrasses himself trying to hit on women. This eventually ends up with him hunched over a toilet throwing up. And right after that, his brain slips again. This is the moment where his vision starts to slowly change. And suddenly we're in the past. Nikolai Orlov, that famous assassination attempt on Tsar Alexander III. That whole mission in Russia bleeding straight into Daniel's brain. But of course, as I said, we're not here for Nikolai Orlov. Fast forward, after Daniel experiences those memories, he stumbles outside, completely out of it. And when a man notices him and asks if he's okay, Daniel doesn't see a stranger. He sees a Templar. He nearly kills him right there in the street. Now again, remember, he doesn't know what an assassin or a Templar is at this point, as he's never actually experienced this literally. This is the result of the bleeding effect. And that's when a mysterious woman named Hannah Mueller intervenes. Now let's go on a bit of a diversion here and answer the question, who the hell is Hannah Mueller? Because her importance really starts to make sense later on. Now Hannah is not some legendary assassin, and that's kind of the point. She was born into the assassin order, trained from a very young age. But by the time we meet her in the comic, she is not a field assassin running around killing people. She works with computers, tech support, data, logistics, that kind of assassin that most people forget even exists. Kind of like a Rebecca Crane or a Bishop. Oh, and she's never actually killed anyone. Anyway, let's get back to Daniel Cross. Now, when he was about to kill that innocent man on the street, Hannah intervenes and assumes Daniel is an assassin who just completely lost control. She screams at him for breaking the creed and drags him into a car, and then takes him to an assassin camp near Philadelphia. And this is where the tone of the story changes in a really important way. When Daniel wakes up the next morning after being completely shit-faced drunk the previous night, he's quite confused because he doesn't recognize where he's at. So Hannah explains that they brought him there because he was drunk and out of control, and they needed answers. The problem is nothing about Daniel makes sense. No one at the camp recognizes him. There are no records of him or any type of history. It's like he simply doesn't exist. And if you recall from Daniel's childhood, we know he technically doesn't, because Daniel Cross was a name given to him as a child by Abstergo. In fact, nobody knows Daniel Cross's real name. To this day, in 2026, it's never been disclosed. Now this is where a man named Paul Bellamy gets involved. You see, Paul Bellamy runs the assassin training camp that we're currently in, which already tells you a lot about who he is. He's a leader. Remember that because it's important later on. Now right away, he starts asking questions that Daniel cannot answer. What division are you in? Field ops, communications, something, anything. But Daniel keeps saying the same thing over and over. He doesn't know what an assassin is. He doesn't know what a Templar is. So they show him his own tattoo. It's an assassin insignia right there on his arm. Daniel swears he got it years ago because it felt right, not because he knew what it meant. And that's the moment where everybody around that table realizes that this situation is way more messed up than they thought. And then all of a sudden, visions hit again. Daniel starts speaking in bloody Russian. In fact, he's repeating word for word Nikolai Orlov's memories out loud without realizing, talking about, Tunguska like he's been there himself. This is where Paul Bellamy presses him on it, asks him what Tunguska means, and Daniel starts to panic. He tries to leave, and this is where two assassins step in to stop him. And without any hesitation or thinking involved, Daniel dismantles both of them with absolute ease. That's again the bleeding effect coming into play, granting him such great combat prowess from Nikolai Orlov. Of course, he does get humbled when Paul Bellamy holds his hidden blade to Daniel's throat just to end the fight, and instead of executing him or throwing him out, they lock him in a cabin and try to figure out what the hell they're dealing with. Now that night, Daniel completely loses it. He trashes his room and starts breaking down. When Hannah comes in to calm him down, he finally tells her the truth. He's supposed to be on medication. Remember earlier, he stopped taking those pills and kept on drinking. So Daniel begs her to let him leave so he can get his pills from his apartment. Now, at first, she hesitates, but eventually agrees and takes him back to his apartment. And when they get there, Daniel realizes something that crushes him completely. His pill bottle is empty because he already threw the last of it away without realizing. Now fast forward a bit, they start, discussing his visions, and eventually Hannah says something that nobody has ever said to him before. Maybe the problem isn't that he's seeing too much. Maybe the problem is that he's been fighting it his entire life. Hannah asks him if there's anything at all he remembers from his visions. Daniel walks to the window and draws a shape in the condensation. It's the shape of a staff. He doesn't know why he drew that, he just knows it matters. Now for context, this staff he drew, by the way, is the staff Nikolai Orlov is searching for in the historical side of the comic. Now at that point, this is where Paul Bellamy bursts into the room with new information. He's been digging through all records, and William Miles tells him that he found something. A mission in 1908, Tunguska. A team was sent there to retrieve an artifact called the Staff of Eden. Almost all of them died, except for one man. Can you guess? That man was Nikolai Orlov, Daniel's great-grandfather, and he resurfaced in America. The memories slam into Daniel all at once. You know, the staff, the apple, Tesla, Eden, the explosion, his own literal birth. History is literally folding in on itself inside of Daniel's head. Paul Bellamy tries to get him to talk through it, but Daniel reacts on instinct and absolutely whacks him in the face and then runs. He climbs onto rooftops, reliving 1908 like it's happening right now, chased by Hannah and Bellamy as they beg him to come down. And when the chase finally ends and his body gives out under the weight of it all, Hannah catches him before he hits the ground. For the first time in his life again, the noise stops. Daniel looks at her and says he finally understands. He knows what he's supposed to do. He has to find the assassin mentor. Now, if you remember back near the start of this video to his childhood, this was the impulse that was planted into his head when he was being experimented on. And now years later, it finally clicks. Now, at this point, all Daniel knows is that he has to find the assassin mentor. He doesn't know anything about killing him. That part isn't even in his mind yet. In fact, in Daniel's head, meeting the mentor is supposed to explain everything. It's the answer to what's wrong with him. It's the answer to everything that's going to fix his life. And that belief becomes his driving force. And from here on out, every choice Daniel makes is built around that one goal: find the mentor. By the year 2000, Daniel Cross isn't drifting anymore. He's not a mess anymore, he's locked in. For 2 straight years, he goes wherever the assassins tell him the mentor might be. He visits different camps and different countries across the entire planet, giving the same speech every time. He tells them about visions, about how he knows the mentor is real, even when everyone around him starts quietly thinking he's chasing a ghost. Some of them straight up tell him he's wasting his time. I mean, at least Hannah's still there though. She sticks by him. I mean, she has feelings for Daniel. You can see at one point when she asks if he needs some company, but Daniel straight up rejects her. Now, to me, I think that rejection happens only because of his past experience with his old girlfriend named Kelly that he unfortunately killed during one of his panic attacks. Maybe he doesn't want that to happen again, I don't know. So he figures he should play it safe. But then suddenly one night, something drastic happens. Daniel's in his room, just trying to wash the day off him, when everything goes sideways. Masked figures rush him. He tries his best to fight back and demands to know who sent them, but eventually he ends up getting a needle stuck in his neck. Daniel Cross was drugged. Now, during his time of being drugged, he experiences those visions again of Nikolai Orlov and his search for the staff. But we're not here for Nikolai Orlov, we're here for Daniel Cross. Fast forward a bit, he eventually wakes up and finds himself surprisingly not tied down or locked in a cell. In fact, he's somewhere quite nice. And that nice is a beautiful, bright and calm Dubai. It doesn't take long for Daniel to realize who he's standing in front of. That's him, that's the mentor, the man he's been chasing across the world his entire life. The voice that's been guiding him for years. And the craziest part is the mentor already knows everything. He knows about the visions Daniel gets. He knows about Daniel's dark past. He's been watching him this whole time. Not to break him, but because he genuinely believes Daniel is important. They end up talking, and for once Daniel isn't being talked down to. The mentor explains what the title actually means. You know, how it simply isn't a rank given to him, but it's actually a very important responsibility. You see, every mentor carries the knowledge of the ones before him, generations of experience passed down. I mean, he even talks about how the assassins have changed for the better, and they want change not by stabbing people in dark alleys anymore, but rather through balance and influence. And then the mentor shows him something very personal, and that's his hidden blade. He tells Daniel it's mostly ceremonial now, but it still works. And when he places the hidden blade into Daniel's hand to give him as a gift and welcome him into the Assassin Brotherhood, this is where something happens. I'm sure you can figure out what's about to happen. Remember earlier in his childhood, what was Daniel Cross implanted with when he was being experimented on? He was implanted with an impulse, and that impulse was to kill the mentor the moment the opportunity presents itself. And if Daniel Cross has a hidden blade on his wrist, I mean, that's the perfect opportunity, right? Now, Daniel has no clue why, but it feels right. He straps it onto his arm, he flexes his wrist, and then it happens. That impulse had been sitting there this whole time, just waiting for this one moment. Daniel's body moves before his mind even has a chance to react. The blade goes straight into the mentor's neck, and the second it's done, panic hits. He has no idea what he's just done or why he did it. As the mentor is dying, he mutters something about Daniel being a Templar traitor, but it means nothing to him, none of it does. One moment it's over, and Daniel is standing there covered in blood, staring at the man he trusted, the man that he believed was going to save him, and now he's bleeding out on the floor because of Daniel. He didn't want this, he didn't choose this, he can't even explain it to himself. Then he hears voices yelling outside the room, and with no time to think, Daniel does the only thing his shattered mind knows how to do. He crashes through the glass and throws himself into a leap of faith straight into the ocean below. So here's where the story gets really messed up, and also where most people completely miss what actually happened. Not because it's obscure lore, but because Ubisoft decided to hide it. This entire section only exists in the epilogue of Assassin's Creed The Fall, and that epilogue is exclusive to the deluxe edition, meaning if you read the standard version of the comic, you literally never see the Great Purge explained. One of the most devastating events in Assassin history, almost wiping out the modern Brotherhood, is tucked away. You can read upon it on the Assassin's Creed Wiki website, but that's just surface level explanation. It's best to read the entire thing in its full extent. So after killing the mentor, Daniel doesn't disappear. In fact, he doesn't try to process what he's done in any healthy way, because let's be honest, he doesn't know how. Instead, he does the most tragic thing possible. He goes home. And for Daniel Cross, home has never been a house or a family. His home is Abstergo. By November 21st, 2000, Daniel walks back into the Abstergo facility in Philadelphia, and the emails between Abstergo executives tell you everything you need to know about how they see him. Warren Vidic doesn't express concern. He doesn't reflect on the damage he's done, and he feels almost fatherly pride watching our boy return. Any emotional connection Daniel once had to his real parents is gone. Abstergo is his family now. Daniel is clearly not stable. He immediately demands to be put back into the Animus, and to be completely honest, that makes sense, because in a way the Animus is the only thing that ever gave him peace. Living inside somebody else's memories has always been easier than sitting with his own thoughts. They put him back into the Animus, fully unrestricted, letting him freely explore Nikolai Orlov's memories again. Fast forward a bit after he's experienced those memories, it works. It calms him down. Now to Daniel, doing this feels like relief. When he's not in the Animus, they let him train new Templar recruits, which is insane when you think about it. This man is barely holding himself together, but they hand him authority anyway. One of the people he trains is a man named Maxim Gorm, another former assassin, another unfortunate victim to Abstergo's brainwashing. Now you see, Gorm is a great Templar recruit, and he excels in his training. Everything Abstergo wants is in Gorm, and Daniel unknowingly shapes him into a weapon. And then that also infamous date of December 6th happens. As Assassin's Creed fans, we know that the 21st of December is the day Desmond sacrificed his life for the world. But the second most important date is without a doubt the 6th of December. This day initiated the start of the Great Purge. Daniel is strapped to a medical bed in a concrete storage room that's been turned into an operating theatre. They inject him with SK345. Now this drug, apart from making him talk, actually reaches into his subconsciousness and rips everything out, destroying him slowly but surely. Every assassin camp he's ever stayed at over the last 2 years, every safe house, every face that ever trusted him. Daniel isn't consciously betraying anybody. He's reliving memories while Abstergo records everything. This is what triggers the Great Purge. Now, if you don't know what the Great Purge is, let me tell you what the Great Purge is, because this is tragic. So, strike teams are deployed globally, causing assassin compounds to be hit almost simultaneously. The assassins have absolutely no time to evacuate. We are witnessing entire assassin camps being wiped out in hours. And leading many of these extermination squads is Maxim Gorm, Daniel's own student that he trained. It's quite crazy because Daniel doesn't pull the trigger for any of this, but none of this happens without him. By the time it's over, the modern day assassin order is shattered. Leadership of entire branches are completely destroyed. There's barely any survivors left. In fact, we know a group of survivors. We meet them in the games. Desmond, Rebecca, Sean, William. This is the result of Daniel Cross. Now, you see, after the Great Purge, Daniel Cross doesn't vanish. In fact, he doesn't spiral the way you might expect either. Instead, he goes silent. For the next year, his life becomes one long Animus session, and I don't mean that in an exaggeration, by the way. He literally spends 13 months inside the Animus with no breaks. Imagine the toll that must have on his head. Just memory after memory as he relives the life of another ancestor. This time, it's not Nikolai Orlov, Innocenty Orlov, who is actually the grandfather of Daniel Cross. Now, in real life, time basically stops meaning anything to him. The Animus becomes his world again, the one place where his head feels stable. Now that doesn't last forever, of course, because in 2002, Dr. Sung pulls the plug. Not because she wanted to help him heal, but because Daniel's brain activity starts going haywire. He's breaking. When she finally introduces herself properly, she tells him how much time has passed. And more importantly, how Abstergo sees him now. They see Daniel as a hero, especially for the events of the Great Purge. He's also the man who killed the assassin mentor, remember? They move him into a new apartment inside the Philadelphia facility, and he loves it. It's basically his reward. But the moment he's alone, the bleeding effect comes right back. He slips into memories again without warning. Later, when he runs into Dr. Sung, his mind betrays him. He doesn't see her as Dr. Sung. He sees her as Anna Orlov, Nikolai's wife. He begs her to let him back into the Animus, but she refuses, tells him he's just going through withdrawal and to give it time. And then she tries to leave. Daniel steals her keycard without her realizing it. That's when he walks through Abstergo's new Animus room. Now this may look familiar to you if you remember Assassin's Creed 3. Of course it's not the same facility because the one in Assassin's Creed 3 was in Rome, but this facility is in Philadelphia. But it's quite identical. Anyway, in this facility there's rows of people, and even worse, captured assassins plugged in like batteries. And then he sees a familiar face lying in one of them. Paul Bellamy, remember him? The man whose life he shattered. Daniel does not give the slightest shit as he keeps walking. He lies down in an Animus himself, only to realize later that it was never even turned on to begin with. The bleeding effect is well and truly still underway within Daniel Cross's mind. After a bit of persuasion and a pep talk from Dr. Sung, Daniel realizes that Abstergo really does care for him. They can be his family. That night, after more fragmented memories, he looks at Nikolai Orlov's file and physically recoils. For the first time, there's anger there. This is where the new Daniel Cross starts to form. He officially joins the Templars soon after, not as some, random foot soldier or a lackey, but as an instructor, training recruits, teaching them how to hunt assassins. He's also back on medication now, meeting Dr. Sung weekly, just stable enough to function. Abstergo even upgrades the hidden blade that he got from the mentor, turning that symbol of betrayal into a tool of authority. When Warren Vidic pulls him into a meeting and tells him he's being reassigned, Daniel doesn't question it. Instead, he just follows orders, as expected. That's how life has always worked. His new mission takes him to Moscow to recover the Prophet's Codex that was written by our also beloved Ezio Auditore da Firenze. This is basically a codex that Ezio wrote that highlights some of his events that he encountered, and one of them events was the meeting that he had with Minerva, as seen in the games. And this codex was hidden beneath the Bolshoi Theatre. Daniel infiltrates the place almost effortlessly. He reads Minerva's message aloud to Vidic. He hears the name Desmond, and he doesn't realize how important that name will become. But from this point on, his obsession with Desmond starts from here, and without any hesitation, he kills the assassin that helped him get to the Codex. Later, still in Moscow, Daniel decides to visit a church while he's still there, and he sits beside an old woman. She notices his cross, but what's interesting is that he doesn't know it yet. But this woman, by the way, is her great aunt, Nadia Orlov. She sees something familiar in Daniel, but he doesn't see anything at all. And that's the tragedy of this version of Daniel Cross, because he's quite calm now. But whatever chance he had at real life, at understanding who he actually was, is gone. And from here on out, he becomes exactly what Abstergo always wanted him to be. Now, before we get into this next chapter, I do have to say, between Assassin's Creed The Chain, which is what I just talked about, to Assassin's Creed 3, where we see Daniel Cross for the first time in a game, there is a decent amount of information about him that happens, but unfortunately, all of that information comes from something called Assassin's Creed Initiates. Now, this was Ubisoft's old community platform where they posted extra lore, dossiers, modern day updates, basically stuff that connects the universe together. But sometime years ago, Initiates got shut down. And when it disappeared, a lot of this Daniel Cross story basically got wiped off the face of the earth. Thankfully, the amazing people at the Assassin's Creed Wiki archived it, and they wrote it as text format for us to see on the wiki. Now, for the sake of this video and not just reading all of his information out loud, I will skip over most of this because you will lose interest hearing me speak about something without any visuals on screen. But if you do want to know about what Daniel got up to between The Chain and Assassin's Creed 3, I'll go over a few moments for you in a brief manner. I just wish Assassin's Creed Initiates was up and running. Now, after everything that happened with what I've already talked about, Daniel Cross rises all the way to the Inner Sanctum and becomes a Master Templar. The Inner Sanctum consists of 9 of the highest ranked modern day Templar members. In 2011, Daniel Cross leads a raid on an assassin hideout and kills a familiar face, Hannah Mueller. Remember her? The one person who tried to save him years ago.
Did you know him?
No, but I knew Hannah.
Who's that?
She tried to help him. She trusted him. but there was a raid about a year ago. She stayed behind so the others could escape. Tried to reason with him to see if she could fix things.
Well, what happened?
What do you think happened? He killed her. That's what he does. That's all he knows how to do. Sometimes it seems like that's all any of us know how to do.
Again, this just shows you how far Daniel has gone. Around the same time, Daniel is project lead at a secret Abstergo facility beneath Denver International Airport, working on the Abstergo satellite powered by an Apple of Eden. Now, what this is a satellite that launched by Abstergo, and this was an attempt to control the entire human race with a piece of Eden's powers. The Apple takes control of Daniel, and he massacres everybody in the facility, at least 20 people, and then the Apple is destroyed. That incident traumatizes Daniel so badly that he later refuses to ever return to Denver. In September 2012, Daniel uses his inner sanctum privileges and authorizes the abduction of Desmond Miles, believing Abstergo has him secured. But what Daniel doesn't know is that the inner sanctum is lying to him. They started a project named Project Siren behind his back. If you want to hear what Project Siren is, this was a top-level Templar plan created by, of course, the Inner Sanctum to squeeze more information about Desmond about an Apple of Eden tied to his ancestors. After Abstergo abducted him, as seen in Assassin's Creed 1, Warren Vidic realized that Desmond would never cooperate willingly. So the plan was simple. Let him think he escaped, move him into a controlled environment that felt safe, and extract everything that they needed without him ever realizing he was still being used. You may remember Lucy, right? Who was a traitor. Well, she was in on Project Siren. She helped Desmond escape and took him elsewhere. But later in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Juno revealed the true plan, and yeah, we know what happened with that. Lucy gets killed. But going back to Daniel Cross, when he found out that Project Siren was happening behind his back, despite him being a member of the Inner Sanctum, he completely snapped. He starts demanding answers and disobeying orders, and eventually assaults Abstergo recruits so badly that multiple people are hospitalized. By late October, Daniel goes off-grid and joins Delta Team in Florence for a final strike on Desmond. Now, what this Delta Team was Abstergo's elite paramilitary task force, a Black Ops unit created specifically to hunt assassins. Daniel Cross helped lead it, and their main objective at the time was capturing Desmond and wiping out his assassin cell in Florence. But Daniel Cross gets too close to an Apple of Eden. His bleeding effect triggers and he collapses mid-fight. Desmond escapes, which causes Daniel to stand back up in a full psychotic break and massacre the rest of his own team. I mean, damn, how many of his own people has Daniel killed at this point? It must be hundreds. Now, after Florence, after wiping out his own Delta team in the middle of a breakdown, you would think Daniel Cross would finally be done, right? Maybe Abstergo would have fired him or even put him down, because he's clearly a problem. But nope, Abstergo doesn't work like that. You see, somehow, despite killing an entire squad of elite Templar operatives, Daniel is allowed back into the Philadelphia facility like nothing happened. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel is plugged into the Animus constantly, sometimes for days straight. He does this because whenever Daniel isn't inside somebody else's memories, he's a complete mess. Always angry, not at himself, but at Abstergo. Because in his mind, they keep failing at the one thing that matters to him, catching Desmond Miles. At some point, he decides Abstergo is moving too slow, so he takes matters into his own hands. He hacks the Abstergo mainframe and uncovers something interesting: ezio power sources. If Abstergo's interested in them, then the assassins definitely are too. And that's of course true, as we know in Assassin's Creed 3 in the modern day. Now, Daniel does not wait for permission. He uses the mess from the hack to break out of confinement. He kills a bunch of Abstergo guards that were sent to stop him, and then he vanishes. Within 1 day, he tracks one of the power sources to Manhattan. He gets there first and waits patiently. Sure enough, look who appears. It's Desmond. Daniel corners him at gunpoint, finally face to face again. He talks a lot of smack, which completely ends up backfiring. Desmond disarms him and knocks him out with the battery before escaping. Again. Daniel wakes up alone the next morning, disoriented, slipping into Russian as the bleeding effect creeps back in. He wanders the city until he's spotted by Juhani Otzoberg, who's been sent to investigate the hacking breach earlier. Daniel attacks him in confusion and gets put down fast. And after that, he's dragged back to Abstergo and locked up. Now, this is the moment where even Abstergo's doctors start saying enough is enough. They email Warren Vidic warning him that Daniel is too unpredictable and he's a massive security risk. Vidic agrees to pull Daniel from leading operations, but he doesn't sideline him. Instead, he does something worse. He makes Daniel Cross his own personal agent. Early December, Daniel tracks another power source to Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is one of my favorite modern day missions in the game, by the way, as it's located within an MMA tournament. The artifact is worn as a bracelet by a rich woman in the crowd. Daniel panics and shoots her and her husband the moment Desmond shows up. He grabs the battery and runs away, but once again Desmond chases him. He listens in and then he waits patiently. We listen to a call where Daniel is talking to Vidic on the phone, and he admits that he nearly failed again, and agrees to spend time in the Animus to calm down.
Right. Good idea. As soon as I get back. Just a few hours inside. It'll help. It always helps. Alright. I'll wait here for you back.
Seconds later, Desmond jumps him. He knocks him out and escapes with the artifact once again. Daniel doesn't even remember most of Brazil afterwards, because by December 6, things have changed quite a lot. Daniel is summoned to witness Juhani Otzelberg's promotion. Now mind you, he's already pissed that Otzelberg is rising while he's being held back. So when Otzelberg sits down, Daniel snaps. He restrains him and forcibly injects a tracking chip into his arm before anybody can stop him. It's very petty and it shows how far he has gone. A few days later, Daniel learns that William Miles has been spotted in Cairo. He assumes that this is finally his mission. Instead, the Inner Sanctum gives this mission to Otzelberg. And this is where Daniel loses it completely. He calls Warren Vidic in a fit of rage, accusing them of trusting the wrong man. And that's when Warren Vidic finally tells him the truth. William isn't the target. He's never been. Desmond's the target. And Vidic needs Daniel to catch him when he comes for his father. And that's how it ends. Daniel flies to Rome. We can see that William is held hostage by Vidic. In the game, we play as Desmond where we show up to save him. And at 5:27 PM, Daniel confronts Desmond one last time inside Abstergo with his gun raised. With victory literally seconds away, something tragic happens to Daniel. It's that goddamn apple of Eden. It's triggering the bleeding effect once again, which causes Daniel to panic and run away. But this time, Desmond chases him down. And here is where the story ends. A couple minutes later, Desmond kills Daniel Cross with his hidden blade. Warren Vidic watches this all on security cameras, swearing revenge that never happens. And a few days later, Daniel Cross is buried in Rome. A very tragic ending to a very, very tragic character. Now before I end this video, I want to leave you with something very deep. What I'm about to show you is the unused Daniel Cross death scene that Ubisoft decided not to add to the final game. Shout out to Slider V2 for managing to put this together. Just take a listen.
All the voices in my head. Screaming. All the time. Begging to be released. But this is my body. My mind. They live their lives. Why don't they let me live mine? You have to silence them. But please, please.